Walruses never cry!
Hello and welcome back to Marvelous Videos. Through comics, TV series and other media, we've witnessed numerous instances between characters that elicit our empathy. However, one movie that stands out in this category is Tusk, a 2014 horror comedy that is so unconventional that you won't believe your eyes. Even if you did, you wouldn't believe your mind. Imagine this, you wake up as a walrus from your sleep. Of course, it's not that simple, but the very thought is terrifying. In this video, we delve into the life of Wallace, who undergoes a transformation into a walrus over time due to factors like karma, fate and more. Before we dive into the details, let me share a little more movie trivia. Have you ever wondered what Johnny Depp, Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith have in common, aside from being prominent figures in Hollywood? Well, they all made appearances in Tusk. Yes, you heard it right. Depp in particular assumes an entirely unrecognizable role as an inspector named Guy Lapointe, as a character we will discuss in this video. Just imagine a storyline that revolves around a podcaster's bizarre journey, a mysterious amputee with strange sea stories, and a man's transformation into a walrus. Intrigued? You should be. So stay tuned because things are about to get delightfully weird in Tusk. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The most disturbing story of a walrus-human hybrid. The story of the walrus man begins with Wallace Brighton, a man who is unfunny but works as a comic and leads a Nazi party, not Nazi, as he corrects multiple times during the film. He is a podcaster who runs his own show along with his friend Teddy in the United States. Now, Wallace is not a nice guy, and we see this within the first 10 minutes of the film. Wallace makes fun of the Kill Bill boy, the boy who accidentally cuts his leg while trying to play with a sword and recreate the legendary movie in Kill Bill, a famous movie by Quentin Tarantino. The Kill Bill boy becomes an internet sensation in no time, with the whole internet trolling him, laughing at him, being an amputee and just being cruel. Wallace in his podcast makes so much fun of the Kill Bill boy that the audience and even Teddy get uncomfortable with him. Wallace is filled with sexual jokes, unfunny and apathetic attitude, often taking things too far. This makes us as an audience want something bad to happen to him. He is one of those villainous people who cheats on his girlfriend and does not care about anything in life except himself. After making fun of this teenager, Wallace is convinced that having him on the show will improve the show and its popularity. So he decides to make his way to Canada to insult the Kill Bill boy in person. Yeah, that is how cruel Wallace actually is. He is set to visit Canada for the weekend, but by the time he makes it there, the kid has committed suicide. Even though he may be one of the main reasons behind the suicide, Wallace feels no remorse. Instead, he feels irritated at the kid for being weak. His only thought after this is, where can I find the next story for this week for the podcast, since the show must go on. This is when he finds a letter tucked in the bar's toilet board by someone named Howard Howe, who claims to have traveled across seas and has no one to share stories with. Our guy feels he has just found a gold mine for the next several episodes of his podcast. He leaves a voice message with Teddy, gets one soft drink and travels using a rented car to Bifrost in search of Howard Howe. His search leads him to a long, lone mansion that looks creepy from the outside itself. He makes his way inside and he is called upstairs by Howard. Now, this is where it gets interesting. At first, everything seems completely normal. Howard is someone who lost his legs and uses a wheelchair, collecting bizarre and antique things, which Wallace brushes off as interesting. Howard supposedly knew Ernest Hemingway and spoke to him. He also has a strange affinity for walruses, but Wallace couldn't make out why. All he knew was that Howard made a walrus his friend when he was in the sea. Everything's all well until Wallace becomes unconscious, probably because of the tea he was offered. He wakes up to an amputated leg, which was supposedly because of the venom of a brown recluse, a type of spider that entered and bit him. Wallace becomes extremely aggressive, trying to leave the house, but he is drugged and can't move or scream. His leg doesn't help either. Meanwhile, back in the US, Allie, Wallace's longtime girlfriend, thinks that Wallace is cheating on her again, since he has done this quite a few times before. Teddy comforts her, and she is convinced that Teddy is the one, and she is wrong to go back or accept Wallace again. As it happens, Wallace wakes up and grabs his phone close by, calling Ali and Teddy, but he is unable to reach out to them. Howard seizes Wallace's phone again and injects Wallace with a sedative, completing his masterpiece and changing Wallace into a complete walrus, stitching the skin and arms of Wallace together. At this point, Wallace looks hideous and unrecognizable, so much that despite being someone who we dislike, we can't help but feel for him. As an audience, we can see in his eyes that he regrets being the way he was, but it's too late to do anything about it. He was no longer a man. He was a man turned into a walrus. Ali and Teddy wake up to the voice messages that Wallace left and leave for Canada since US police think it is a prank. So does the local police in Canada, but they give the contact of Guy Lapointe, a weird French officer searching for a serial offender for over a decade. He explains how the perpetrator was once so close that he had met him, but since he behaved as an old helpless man named B. Moiser, who got away, also known as Howard Howe. Ali and Teddy join forces with Guy Lapointe, while Wallace, who is now named Mr. Tusk, learns to swim under Howard's command. This is when he sees another walrus man dead in the same pond that he is held in. This makes him fight for life, learning how to swim. Out of no other option, Wallace feeds on the fish that Howard gives. The final showdown takes place between Howard and Wallace, while Ali, Teddy and Guy have figured out where Howard is. This is where we realize that Howard always thought that he had killed Mr. Tusk out of survival instinct without ever giving him a chance to fight back. In return, he gives Wallace, who is now Mr. Tusk, a chance to fight. We will get more into what Howard thought and went through in a minute, but coming to this showdown, Howard fights Wallace by covering himself in the skin of another walrus. This back and forth eventually leads to the victory of Wallace, but he turns into a complete walrus with negligible memory. The dark motive behind Howard Howe's transformation of Wallace into Mr. Tusk. Now, what exactly led Howard Howe to commit such dark acts on people? Was he one of those mad scientists with a desire to conquer the world? What could he possibly achieve by turning Wallace and many others into walruses anyway? For this reason, let us delve into who Howard Howe was before he became the animalistic man we see in the film. Howe lived with his family, but his parents passed away when he was barely 5, leaving him alone in an orphanage. The orphanage was fine until they ran out of funds. They started welcoming guests who would exploit the orphanage kids in every way. One time, he is deep in the sea when all his crew members are either dead or on the verge of it. Howard is saved by a walrus who becomes his best friend, and he names him Mr. Tusk. They land on a small island waiting for help. However, his survival instinct kicks in and he kills Mr. Tusk, his only friend, to fulfill his hunger. Howard is rescued soon after, but he decides that every human is selfish while every walrus is perfect. He now starts hunting for selfish, inconsiderate and savage humans, amputating and stitching their bodies in a certain way to shape them like walruses. Wallace is the last of his victims, as in the end, Howard accepts that his Mr. Tusk has revisited him and taken revenge. Is Mr. Tusk a true story? Many sources believe that this story is true, and we had similar doubts ourselves. I can literally see you getting riled up at the idea of a story like this being true. The answer is simple. Tusk is not a true story. The entire plot, as bizarre as it is a product of Kevin Smith's creative imagination. The movie's inspiration comes from a conversation between Kevin Smith and his co-host Scott Mosier on their podcast Smodcast during episode 259, titled The Walrus and the Carpenter. In this episode, Scott shared a story about a man offering free rent to anyone willing to dress up as a walrus. While this was in fact a false advertisement and did not exist in reality, it sparked an idea in Kevin's mind to create a horror story based on this bizarre premise. In a curious twist, reports revealed that the hoax ad offering free rent was crafted by a writer named Chris Parkinson from Brighton, England. Surprisingly, he received responses from over 400 people who expressed interest in the unusual opportunity. The character of Howard Howe, played by Michael Parks in the film, draws similarities to Ed Gein, a real-life serial killer known for his gruesome hobby of creating suits from human skin and disfiguring his victims. While Tusk takes inspiration from these elements, it remains a work of fiction. Regarding the script and casting, Kevin Smith revealed that he initially approached Justin Long for the role. However, Justin had reservations as his agent warned him not to take on the project, fearing it might negatively impact his career. Justin felt apprehensive about the film not being a typical horror movie but rather a horrifying one due to the monstrous transformation. Eventually, he was convinced about the concept and agreed to take on the role. Tusk ends with an open-ended climax, leaving room for a sequel. Kevin Smith has confirmed that he is actively working on continuing the story, so while Tusk may not be based on a true story, its weird and eerie world continues to expand in the hands of its creators. Marvelous verdict. To conclude, the Walrus Man hybrid originated from the sad life story of Howard, who associated as Mr. Tusk will come back if he made humans into a walrus. He also thought humans were evil, and only animals knew compassion. Tusk shaped itself into a mind-bending cinematic experience that defies the norms of traditional narrative and storytelling. With its remarkable plot and unforgettable performances, this 2014 horror comedy left us all in awe. So if you're a fan of the extraordinary and crave a movie that challenges your imagination, Tusk is a must-watch. Buckle up for a sad science fiction and horrendous ride into the weird and wonderful. For those who have the privilege of watching Tusk, let us know what you think could be different or more extraordinary in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.